and they aren't going to let the real thing happen. It has to be manufactured and shepherded in the direction that they've had a plan for decades.
Oh, if not centuries, or even millennia, depending on where you want to go with the level of control on the planet. President Biden's economic decisions are gripping our nation, and everyday Americans are watching as their purchasing power continues to fall further, and the uncertainty of what's ahead in 2022. This administration has moved forward with $6.6 trillion of spending, and next on the agenda is the greatest tax hike in generations. Economists are comparing our current inflationary environment to 1970s inflation, and if you look back, gold was up 20x and silver 37x from 1970 to 1980. Learn how simple it is to add physical gold and silver to your portfolio ahead of the rise in inflation and predicted price rises. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-356-4470 and get a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
Hello, and welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight we have special guest David DuByne from Adapt 2030. He discusses energetic changes on Earth as the sun repeats its 400-year cycle of low activity, affecting global crop production and the economy and everyone on our planet, with a timeline for what you can expect from now to 2023 as society resets. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, thanks for the kind intro. And I think it's more of a once in a 2,000-year cycle this time, not a 400, which would mean a heavier, more powerful cycle. Everybody can feel the vibrations changing, and I don't mean that in a woo-woo fashion. Just things seem to be speeding up faster. And I think we all feel it. We all see something across the news waves that it is being tweaked a little bit from your old life that you used to know. Ask yourself why, and you say, well, these cycles are back here right now again. So somebody's front running the cycle, trying to gain control. So the world doesn't go insane as we move through these next few years. And you're right, 2023 and 24 are going to be the apex of wave number one. The most transition and change will occur between now and these next 3 years. But then after 2024, we'll get a real good timeline on intensities, earth changes, climate extremes, and this sort of thing moving forward on where the crops are going to grow or not, how much food will be available for versus the population of the planet, and then how much unrest that will be and how that will be controlled. Then they'll do it the same thing 2.0, 2028 wave. So thanks for having me on. There's a lot to talk about, and especially the spiritual side of things. That's really a solution that we need to think about versus, trying to live in a basement for 30 years with canned food. That's not going to do it. You're going to have to get out there with your communities and whatnot.
Yeah, I've been watching your work for a really long time, and I really couldn't think of a better person to talk about all the things that you discuss, earth changes, the grand solar minimum, food and crop production and shortages, economic stability, and of course the energy grid, because we know that that's in a constant state of flux. So, and you're the expert in this field, so let's kind of just jump right into this. And since it's your first time on the show, maybe give a little background on how you got into researching these cycles, and did something happen, like an event that maybe got you interested in going down this rabbit hole of research?
Totally by accident, totally random, totally unexpected, but it changed my life to devote all my time and energy to try to put the message out that we got a huge problem. It's occurring now, but when I started my channel and talking about this, 2014, 15, I used to buy coffee in Myanmar, a place called Burma. and we were inter-Asia trading. So we'd buy coffee down in Myanmar, export out of Yangon port, and then we would send to different parts in different countries in Asia, Japan, Taiwan. And buying coffee after, a good 5th, 6th trip into there, they invited us to stay up at their coffee farm, and, you start to get more invited around once they know you're a real buyer. You're actually going to spend money and, commit to new plantings out in their coffee farms that they can count on that production from that acre is going to you. So when you start to put that investment in, then they take you seriously. So when we started talking about new acreage going out, they said, yeah, we're overplanting right now about 14% because the extreme cold's killing off part of the plants in the 1 to 2 year sapling stage once they're out in the field. And the bean density is less because the water freezes into microsphereal, leaves these pockets in there. So the density is not as tight and as it used to be. So roasting profiles are going to be a bit different. And then at the same time, the top leaf kill on the plants. So I was 100% global warming. That's all I ever knew. I saw the Al Gore movie back in the day. It was jaw dropping, like, whoa, when he got on that thing, and oh, the CO2 is going up here. Oh, it's just going to melt. All by 2009. Remember, there was going to be no ice by 2009. Oh, wait, 2013. Sorry, my bad. Oh, I mean, 2018. Sorry, 2050 sometime now. Anyway, I was so into the global warming. So when I went down there, it didn't make sense to me because, Burma, for those of you, Myanmar, it's right near the equator. And even though you're up at 1,000, 1,200 feet for the Arabica beans, I just started looking around as a business guy, looking out about 5 years to see if we'd have enough supply to continue to expand the business. Because the only way you're going to expand a coffee business is getting more supply. So if you could put the money down as investment in the field production itself, plantings, or you could just buy production. That's the way we're, okay, is it going to keep expanding down there for years and years so we can grow the business? Then they started talking about the cold damage, and this made, so then I just started looking back. All right, well, cold damage didn't make sense to me. I started to look back in the past because they told me their grandfathers and great-great-grandfathers in the 1880s or so talked about extreme cold doing the same thing. And that's when the British were over there and just starting to put coffee in as a cash crop. So I started looking back in these cycles, just as a guy going, maybe okay. And then I ran into John Casey's work. And then once I saw John Casey's presentations, former NASA space shuttle lead investigator, no less, lead investigator for when the shuttle went down and it made the world news. And when that thing, when you saw the fuselage was blasting off everywhere, he was the lead investigator for that, for NASA, coming out. And as soon as he started to come out with these cycles of the sun and giving a timeline to when the next low cycle was coming and the damage it would have on society, 30-year distinguished career at NASA ruined. So this is a guy, I was like, he's telling the truth. They wouldn't ruin him like that if he hadn't put the information out. And that was the very first trickle into it, because learning about these cycles is one thing, having a little similar timeline of when they're occurring. But then where it really slaps you in the face is when you go back through history and you start to see dynasties, emperors, fiefdoms, kingdoms, kings and queens all collapsing on this same cycle, 400 year. And then you start to really go, oh, wow, it's going to be a huge problem. Wonder what food production is going to be like moving forward. And then I started to, start the Adapt 2030 channel and put those signs together. This is 2014, 15. So I was looking for the outliers of these extremes at the time, extreme snowstorms, record-breaking temperatures that were breaking the records from the 1880s. And that's what I initially started on. And those, you'd have to look through the news and you get a good 5 or 6 per week. I was doing videos explaining these things about more cycles, but then you get the news stories added in on top of the cyclic information. But then come around now, for example, there's thousands, there's so many, there's no way one person can continue to report that much of what I would trickle in 2014, 15 about these changes on the extremes that we're seeing. It's so overwhelming and such a tidal wave. Then you try to add the information in about the economy, because the 3 things that happen every grand solar minimum are these, I termed it the fingerprints of the grand solar minimum. The population migration, which people need to leave to go to better quality of life, whether they're a place where they're growing food in the 1600s or just a place where you could have a job or you wouldn't freeze or you had food accessibility. And then the economy would collapse globally because value of work or whatever was of value at that time that mechanism that tagged it to value as an asset class or whatever it was, labor that was valued at a certain amount, or crops that were valued at a certain amount through hundreds of years, for the amount of silver pegged to that, thrown out of the window, because now everything was rising 3, 4, 5x in price. Labor force was reduced, population was reduced about 25% in the 1640 to 1690 era. Global population collapsed that much. So just like we're seeing today, there's barely enough people to hold together our economy with a thread anyway. Things are collapsing on the supply chain side. There's just not enough workers to even keep and maintain bare minimum operations at so many places. And I'm just looking at it really and saying, wow, that is exactly like it's been every collapse cycle that I looked back through. The next thing we're going to look for is change in government, as people become angry and hungry on the streets and want change. But, you know, you see all these mechanisms today to prevent that. So when I look back, I'm thinking, they have better technology and they're stepping in front of the cycle preemptively to stop the same things happen that have happened for the last 7 or 8 of these events that I've studied, all the way back to, I don't know, about 2000 BC, pretty good research back to say 500 BC or the Homeric minimum. And, you know, what I find too might map up with this. Further you go back in history, the foggier it gets, which you think would be the inverse. Because if it was such a historical event and it was the center of the world at that time, there'd be an enormous amount of records, but there aren't. So what happened? I'm still trying to figure it out. Is it hidden? Did it just collapse so deeply that things were lost? Because, you know, the things were meant to last back then. A lot of stone carvings, a lot of things carved on materials and medium that we don't use today that would withstand the test of time. I don't know. There's missing chapters of history that don't make sense. And the explorations of a lot of nations were based on these same cycles. I don't know if they were looking for better food grow areas, different economy. I don't know, but you start to see the same things again. And I tell you, absolutely, we are in the center of it right now. It's at the crossover point where it can't be hidden anymore. And this is the rollover year, 2022. The food's going to get super expensive. I mean, you haven't seen anything yet in food price rise. Wait till it doubles again. It's not available. That'll be the first thing. And it'll be unavailable first before the food price gets to the point where you'll go to the street. We'll start chipping away at your availability on the store shelves. And once you start to see things disappearing, you go, okay, well, I didn't need that anyway. It was too expensive. I wasn't going to buy it. But then when your milk runs to 12 bucks a gallon by the middle of next year, people are going to start to go, whoa, now I'm starting to get a little angry here. Things are going to get really expensive. So everybody's going to witness some extreme in climate coming up. 23 and 24 are going to get outrageous, with the second magnetic field building in the outer solar system, having more effect on our Earth's atmosphere. So it's at the point right now, it can't be hidden any longer. So Ryder, I don't know, how do you think what you would do if you're a government? How would you hide this information with the people now that you know that this year is the very last year that you can't hide it because it's going to be visible in front of everybody's eyes? So how would you mask it or control the populace once they know it's here?
I would create a distraction, and then I would shift responsibility, because we know that they're never going to take responsibility, David. That's their number one in their playbook. They have to create some other kind of manufactured event and blame it on that instead of it actually being blamed on them, because they're never going to take responsibility. And we know that massive food shortages are coming. I mean, that's an inevitability. You can't just shut down the world for 2 years and not expect any repercussions in the supply chain, right? Wheat production at a very low right now. Stores and supermarkets trying to hide the fact that they don't have any product. You know, world food prices at an all-time high. It's really a setup for a huge food disaster. But I guess my question is, David, I might be skipping here a little bit, but
no, skip around.
What is this supply chain going to be replaced with? Because it has to be replaced with something, right? They have to transition this system into something new. Now, what that new system is going to be, I really have no idea, but they have to collapse all of it in order for something new to be built. And that goes for the monetary system, that goes for the food distribution system. So What's your thoughts on what they're going to replace this entire system with? Because I watched your show the other day with that gentleman that was talking about the new monetary system that they're going to install. And I agreed with a lot of what he was saying, but there's a few things that I didn't agree with. And one of those things being that they just can't introduce a brand new system out of nowhere, right? Because if they did that, then that would create too much opposition to it and it wouldn't get everybody on board. They have to make people suffer a little bit. And that requires us waking up one day when it comes to the monetary system and our money being completely worthless, right? We're still going to have all of our money, but we're not going to be able to buy anything with it. And they're going to stretch that out for a while, right? And then they'll introduce the new system when everybody is on their knees and begging for it, right? That's the way that they have to do it. And that's the way that they've done it. They have to make us think that it's our idea. And if they don't, then that creates too much opposition and resistance to a new system. So they have to collapse it, make us struggle for a bit, and then out of the chaos, they birth a new system. So what's your thoughts on that?
Homodor starving the planet on purpose here for the supply chain as we go through. And, you know, you mentioned this different, and I've been I'm trying to get together a new graphic right now, because the new monetary system is going to be built on several parts. First one's going to be a non-usage tax. So right now in England, what they're proposing is if you buy an electric car, you're going to have to pay a road tax because you're not going to buy fuel, which is road tax is included in the fuel taxes. So since you're not buying fuel anymore, you're not going to be adding anything in monetarily into the roads. So that'll go with water. So if you drill your own well and you get off the system, you'll have to pay a non-usage fee. Also, those who are getting ready, you know, solar, wind, whatever it is on your property, anybody who's going to get more self-autonomous is going to have to pay a non-usage tax, and that'll be through the transition of everything. Now, I'm not sure if this will, you know, stay the same 20 or 30 years from now, but during the transition, it will. Another part, there's 5 parts of this, the transition to the new economy. Now, this has not come off of Peter's interview. I've been working on this for over a year now to figure out where this new transition, because you're right, they have to have something to replace it. Now, the best way I've been told so far is they're just going to lock the system for a month or two and then just restart an entirely new system. So there'll be no opposition, like you say. People will be begging to get any monetary thing back. The cards won't work. ATMs won't work. No online banking. Nothing will work except your physical gold and silver in your hand. And then they'll just turn the system back on, revalued, and they'll probably revalue your money either 100 to 1 to 1,000 to 1. You'll still have new money, but it'll be a fraction. And then this whole Gesara thing, which is built onto this whole new monetary system. See, Gesara, you know, it sounds great and everything. Like they're going to absolve all your debt. You're going to have no taxes. There'll be there'll be no income tax, but there'll be a flat rate 17% consumption tax or 15%. Well, that doesn't matter. You're still paying tax on everything you consume. And then the whole thing about you have to register for a digital ID, global digital ID, by using your social security number and your driver's license to get into a new digital ID system. They're putting you right in the hands of the global ID at that point. I mean, serious global ID to be able to access the money in this new utopian system. And then, you know, they're talking about the quantum financial system and everything's going to be blockchain based, and they're going to be rocking with the crypto, with the central bank digital currencies, which again locks you right back into the central control. The whole point of blockchain and crypto was to get out of the central control. But then the mining's being co-opted into these megaliths that are these, you know, consolidated mining giants that control all the hash and algorithm capacity all over the crypto space. I mean, you can't mine anything on a rig in your house like you used to way back in like 2016 and 15. Impossible. You know, then they locked you into the new system. You got to have a global digital ID. Okay, well, what if they change the rules and say, we now need to do this to continue to have access to that ID? Oh, and by the way, money. You know, so this whole thing about, and then the crypto keys, the reason I was talking about, yeah, it's going to have central bank digital currency and you'll have autonomy with your money, but your private keys to the wallets where the CBDC are going to be deposited are also under centralized control. You don't own your own keys. It's in a central repository, the quantum financial system. Whoa, but it's centralized again. You have no control of your money whatsoever. If I have a dollar bill, it's mine. It's in my hand. I can control it unless the government collapses and lose value. But as long as I have that piece of paper in my hand, I control the money. Or a piece of gold or silver, it's mine. It's in my hand. I control it. But the minute you go into 100% digital space, central bank digital issuance, and then the private keys are controlled by the issuer, you got nothing. You got less than nothing because they could pull your ID. Oh, how do you prove who you are now? You can't. There's no paper documents anymore. Oh, there's no more digital. There's no more paper money. Everything's digital. So how would you buy anything? You know, it's great that they want to take away the taxes and all this new plan system, but they're going to replace it with something way more nefarious than what's been going on now. That's what the transition's about, to get you into this new system. And I digress. I have these parts here. The non-usage tax for anything that you're going to get off the system to do by yourself to make you autonomous, you're still going to have to pay for it. Don't care if all those solar panels are paid for and you got 20 kilowatts coming off your property or 100 kilowatts or 50, whatever it is, you got to pay for that now because you're not using the system. And then there'll be an eco value or they call it like an eco value tax or an eco value assessment asset class. They're going to revalue all the land and forest, and all the land across the planet will be revalued as a sum pledged against to create a new currency base. In addition to, they call it a basket, and they're so cute. They're calling it a rainbow currency. Yeah, well, it's supposed to be the gold at the end of the rainbow, but then also the different colors within the rainbow. So you got red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet. So go around and pick the currencies that are the exact same colors. Those will also be a basket plus the gold. Okay, then with that, that's something more usable. And then we got crypto, which will be its own market. And then here's another thing that goes right along in the eco valuing of land and forests is all this carbon market. So these carbon allocation credits for you and I on the personal side, okay, that's one thing. You know, they're going to give you like 10 credits a month for carbon to spend. And once you run out of your 10 credits, you're going to have to go purchase more to then go buy the item you want to buy. So wait a second, it's an existential threat. We can't put any more in the atmosphere yet. If somebody holds a forest over there, you can buy a carbon credit from them and they can still pollute, and then you can go buy that thing you want to buy. You just have to buy the carbon credit from the people trying to stop CO2 from going in the atmosphere that created a market out of thin air. So they can still put it up, but you have to pay for it because somebody else, I don't know, you see where that goes. But the carbon market is going to be the base of that, which rolls back into the eco value, where they're going to take seriously large chunks of the earth off usage, shall we say. And once they set apart an eco value, they're going to set that between 20 and 70 years of no human souls are allowed to use that land, not even cutting one tree, not even a single tree. But then they'll use that as a base for a currency. So you can't have people going in and whacking down 100,000 acres of what your currency was based on. So once they start, cordoning off these areas that are going to be the eco value, then you can see those are going to be done for the carbon allocation credits. So those go to like a DNA strand. And also what I really don't like either is, again, I like to use this word front running, meaning somebody knows what's going to happen before the event by months or years. These billionaires are out there. They're buying millions and millions and millions of acres of just remote forest land. But then find out, oh, if you have forest, you can put it into the carbon system now, and you can register your forest. And then each year there'll be a certain amount of dollars paid to you based on the tree species, which they'll use LiDAR to determine what the average tree species is and give you a value per acre that's paid in cash. Well, it'll probably be crypto back to your account, as long as you pledge the forest for 20 or more years. Now see and you got to realize it's going to be up to $200 an acre. Right now it's about $8. In the future, they're going to try to level it at $200 per acre per year. So who's out there? What billionaires went off and bought 5 million acres up at the edge of the ranges somewhere, private land? They probably pledged it to the state or to the country as a national park, but I still own it. They register that. And for each acre they have each year, they're getting that amount, anywhere from $8 to $200 per acre directly into their own personal bank account. So do that times 1 million acres every single year moving forward. Who just got played? So that's a whole new monetary system. It's going to be similar to what we have now, but the infrastructure is going to start to break apart during year 2023 and 24. And you should start to see some infrastructure start to shatter and make no sense, and breakages and outages coming up here real heavy in 2022. March, whereas it would begin, and as we move towards September, October, and November of next year, the most crazy, outlandish, unbelievable, that can't happen types of things will be happening that will explain away breakdowns in infrastructure, non-deliveries, and more supply chain constraints and breakdowns in cutoff points. And that's the new graphic I'm working on.
100%. And I think
Got to shorten it though in the words.
Yeah, and it's going to catch a lot of people off guard, David, because we've been made to believe if we just well, the majority of people, the majority of the population has been made to believe if they just comply and go along with all of this nonsense, then everything is going to go back to normal. And that's not the way that it's going to work. We're going to see things break down, and people are going to be asking why. And when they've been out there fanning the flames of this the entire time, right? And they've been fanning the flames and talking about how, oh, we just need to do this, we need to go do that, and everything will be all fine. We just need to listen to the government and what they're saying. And then when everything is on fire, they're going to be like, well, how did it all get on fire? Like, how did this happen? Well, you were the one that made that happen, right?
No, they'll twist it into you were because you didn't believe heavily enough in the government, because you were the last one. You were the 100th monkey or the straw that broke the camel's back. It didn't work just because of you, because you didn't believe. It's all your fault. See, yep. Blame it on Ryder.
But that's the thing that they always do. They always shift the blame. It's always someone else's fault. It's always another country's fault, and they blanket it. It's another group's fault. It's another person's fault, and they spread that out and put an umbrella on all of it, and it's a constant blame game, because they're never going to take responsibility for anything that they do, because if they did, then that would wake too many people up, and then we would have real riots, we would have real chaos and real anarchy, and they aren't going to let the real thing happen. It has to be manufactured and shepherded in the direction that they've had a plan for decades.
Oh, if not centuries, or even millennia, depending on where you want to go with the level of control on the planet. We're coming into a period right now that hasn't been experienced in 2,000 years. So the reason I was talking about the infrastructure starting to break and get much more unreliable moving forward, there's a second magnetic field starting to form in the outer solar system. And it's comprised of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And they're going to be the closest physically possible in our solar system. There's no other way. This is the closest they can physically ever be together, ever. It's coming up in 2024 of October. Now they're going to form a square in the outer solar system, in one quadrant of the solar system, bunched together. And then the sun's stepping down in its activity as well. And the Earth's, trying to match that electrical discharge from what the sun's been giving us for several hundred years. The crust has a little bit of extra charge into it, so it's trying to discharge out. And we're starting to see a lot of atmospheric lightning from ground to sky, the blue jets, the red sprites, the elves, and even now some of the field, the magnetic field lines are glowing because the plasma ropes wrapping around that, called auroral ropes, are big enough and wide enough to illuminate an entire magnetic field line circumference coming into the planet. This is the kind of change that's happening. Now, as this magnetic field intensifies through 2024, the Earth's crust, top 2 miles, are going to start to, they're going to start to crack, rift, sinkholes, just things that don't make sense. Like the land will just uplift by itself with no earthquake, nothing. It'll just, like it did, where's that, Minnesota? A farm field lifted 30 feet. It was in a bean field, I believe. The farm just lifted up 30 feet. And you'll start to see all these things, and these escarpments just form out of nothing. Another one you want to look for, specifically agriculture, water, aquifers, is one. Something will break and like a river will drain overnight, or an entire lake, or a well system will go dry. These are the types of things that are going to happen, because most of it's going to be limited top 1 to 2 miles of the crust. Now, there's no determination on how deep actually, but I'm just going to say the top mile of the crust is going to behave strangely, and that would include roads, rail lines, conduits. Doesn't matter if it's a fiber optic cable, if it's an electrical cable, if it carries a liquid or a gas, natural gas, oil, whatever, water. Those are going to break. They're going to get pulled apart 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 feet. Okay, how long does that take to repair? Right now, way longer because the supply system's broken down. Now, the only other times you can find this in history in the last 2,000 years, 79 AD and 1486, are the only two times in the last 2,000 years that this configuration of the planets being so close, their maximum closeness that they can ever be together in a single quadrant as a tiny little square forming a second magnetic field that will loop onto our Earth. Because you got to realize it's only Mars and then Jupiter. So we're 2 planets away from the second magnetic field forming. And you know, we're 3 planets away from the sun. Now the second magnetic field is not going to be very strong, but it is going to be. And people are always, something that, people need to make consideration of is the discounting that this phenomenon is already getting. Oh, it's not going to have it. It's barely, and it's barely anything. It's not going to have. Okay, you don't get it. It's a second magnetic field in the solar system. Yeah, it's something, but oh, it's really small. It's tiny in comparison to the sun. Well, who knows what happens when the sun steps down on a 400 or a 2,000 year cycle. And we have a second field building in the outer solar system. Now, what's interesting, being 2 planets away from that second field, intensifying day by day until 2024, October, and the sun stepping down. So if you know what toroid waves are, they're looping in on themselves. And then with us, the Earth, 2 planets away from the second field and 3 planets away from the major field, we're going to be right in the middle. They call this a Bosch wall. Now, I don't know if we'll be exactly in the Bosch wall in the center where it's an overlapping perfection of, it's almost a nullification of wave as it goes through its form there when it reaches that precise middle point. Now, we might be on either side of that, getting enclosed and interlooped by 2 magnetic fields. So you got to tell me, what's our atmosphere going to do? What's the crust going to do? These things are set in motion or locked in place by magnetic strength of our planet. Magnetosphere collapses, jet streams go out of flow. Cloud cells are moving everywhere. That's why when you have really high, incredible solar activity, there's huge, plentiful grain harvest because everything locks in place. So your ability to plant at a certain day and harvest at a certain day is locked in time, literally locked in with the sun's intensity and the magnetic field on our planet, locking everything in that makes us grow food, like the rainfall patterns. Once that gets real weak, those things go completely out of flow. Now, generally on the 11-year cycle, commodities traders trade on this cycle on what's going to happen with La Nina or El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. Like that's a known cycle. Grain guys and girls have been trading forever. Grain traders, man, they've been doing that for 200 years. Once they understood dragging a thermometer across the ocean on the sailboats back then, the water temperatures changed. And when they, the meticulous records that they found that pattern pretty early on, it was well established by, say, 1850. So I think a solid 150 years, 170 years, they've been trading grains on what happens with the Pacific water temperatures based on the solar cycles. Just expand that out. Whether it's a La Nina or an El Nino pattern doesn't really matter. It's a cycle, right? You already know El Nino, cool water, warm water, but just bring it up. 400-year grand solar minimum, high electric charge, low electric charge, high electric charge, low electric charge. And you'll start to see, doesn't matter what the cycle duration is, it's a cycle that can be mapped out with pretty good precision now. And you know their effects and consequences because it's happened many, many times before. Now pluck those arrows out of history and then you'll get a good blueprint of what's coming up the next few years.
Have you seen any like stream, like a solar flare or a solar discharge in any of these cycles that you've tracked back during the grand solar minimum? Because whenever you were talking about that, I thought, okay, well, if the sun is stepping down in a grand solar minimum, it would probably release a big discharge before it gets to its peak lowness. Does that make any sense? Have you seen throughout history any kind of, it doesn't matter how big or how small, but a solar discharge or a solar flare during this period of the grand solar minimum?
Yeah, and more. You could look at the micronova that occur every 12,000 year, or you can look at the X flare that just blasted off the sun a few days back on the Halloween X flare that arrived here. So you can go from incredible earth ending, half of the earth ending events, depending on what side of the sun the Earth was facing when a micronova blasted off the entire plasma shell, plus particle, plus energy, everything flying at the Earth, and that smacks and leaves glass beads across the entire moon surface and planet from that level all the way down to like the X1 that we just saw. Yeah, and you could get, I would envision, you know, a bunch more plasma density events, CMEs, and would it be 100 small 1X flares? Because there were, let's see, about 3.5 months ago, 4 months ago, there was like an X8 that ripped off the back of the sun. Luckily, it wasn't Earth facing, because if that was, that would have ended all of our power grids. So you're starting to see, especially since 2015, like extreme X events, you know, extreme discharges off the sun. Now, will it take an array of 100 of these between X1 and X8 events? Or will it be that, and then there's like a super discharge where we get an X100 or something, and that would be a full halo discharge. I don't care where you were in the solar system when that happened. But I would anticipate, if it were right at 2024 in October, if the sun were affected magnetically from that second magnetic field through the Earth, and it was all just one giant field at that point in there looping on itself, whatever discharge there would be from either Jupiter and Saturn as well. Don't discount those. Those are, especially Jupiter, that's just an unignited star sitting out there. So you never know what's going to happen with the electrical phenomenon coming through these planets that are as large as unignited stars in some fashion. Because Jupiter, well known, it could be a brown dwarf. You know, I'm not talking about Nibiru, just discount that right away. I'm just saying what Jupiter classification is. You know, throw a bunch of more electrical strangeness into that, and something could glow, move, discharge, reignite, whatever it would be. Because, you know, earlier, if you follow the Thunderbolts project, they go back into a lot of electric geology and different types of electric myths, if you will, to explain what's happening in the heavens with the squatter man when there's more plasma visible, with the increase in charge in it, where it's visible in the skies, and it's on, you know, there's a lot of canyon walls and petroglyphs based on what they saw literally in the sky, so highly charged that the entire sky was full of different dancing plasma, what we would consider as petroglyphs. But they were saying that Saturn used to be a glowing body, like nearly a star up there, as recently as 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, based on the legends, the myths, the mythology, and the traditions bringing these stories forward. So if that's the case, how would it be if we get it sort of close to this second magnetic field here in 23, 24, and Saturn starts glowing again, like not the little tiny thing that you see with your binoculars now, but literally like an eighth of the size of the sun? How would people interpret that? In the middle of the evening, you have a second body glowing like a second sun in the solar system. I think there shall be signs in the skies, because I know the plasma is going to rock back here, and we're going to see, you know, myth and legend dancing in the skies in front of us 2024. That's going to be hard enough to control when you see plasma ropes, snakes, twists, shapes moving and morphing through the heavens here from different electrical inputs into it. Would change the color as well. So it's not all going to be pink and red. You know, you're going to have some greens up there and blues as well. There's just how would you control that? But see, this is where it goes into, is this discharge pattern from the sun stepping down. It's going to let some small ones, but it's going to let a big one too. And how does that stand in with, you know, going back 5,000 years or 8,000 years, 4,000 years, these huge events in history that we rarely hear about have been kind of erased from our pattern recognition of gigantic cataclysmic events based on either comets impacting the Earth, the sun turning black, the Earth reversing itself, all these. This is well-known myth, legend, story, tradition, all the way through almost every culture except our own modern culture, which doesn't understand the cycles of electricity and electrical input, high electrical current, low electrical current. This is the basis for the solar system itself, but you and I sitting on this planet, how stable the food growing times are and the harvest time. The plant and the harvest times are being thrown out of sync right now. But with all this electrical activity changing and the magnetism, et cetera, The human resonance field and the way we perceive reality is going to change. The hemispheres in your brain are going to change the way they process information out of this. But it's an energy change and shift. And since we're energy too, and magnetic frequency changes the way you perceive in the hemispheres of your brain, there's a lot of human change coming. And I think the governments understand that as well, that this massive amount of human observational changes here, right along with all the changes in the food, the economy, the light from the sun, the light from other planets, all these types of things. It's all morphing into one giant package. But I would fear most if I was a government, people waking up and taking control of their powers that are given to them during this 10-year period to be able to manifest faster, perceive, and then see through the veil of control, and then manifest that through the mind, not any physical action, but the mind to bend the field that's in front of us. And that's where we're going with these energetic changes, if I might stay there in that sort of road of thought.
Yeah, and how would you stop people from perceiving things different? How would you stop people from getting these energetic changes like this? I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Like, you would get them to take a experimental medical treatment, right? And to skew your perception and screw with your brain, right? That's the way that I see it. They know that these things are about to happen, and that's the way that they think that they can physically stop it. But how long do you think the second electromagnetic field is going to be affecting Earth? Is it going to be something permanent, or is it going to be something that kind of comes in and then goes away after a certain period of time?
Everybody can do this. Let's follow along. Solar System Scope is where you want to go to, solarsystemscope.com. In there, you can see where the planets are moving around, and you can go out into the future and you can go back in the past. So I think now, when I originally started using Solar System Scope to find these same geometric matchups or planetary geometry where the planets sit in their orbits, that program free used to go back to 2200 years ago, or 200 BC. No, it was 400 BC. I was able to get some information on planetary matchups. And you can start to see when they form that square, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, when they form that square, it actually looks like a square in the outer solar system. So it's pretty easy to see it. You're not going to have one over here and one over here. And one. That's more the balance. That's why it doesn't swing over into this change. But when you start to see those, get your cursor and mouse, and then just move the planets forward until you come to October of 2024. Then you can use your mouse to scroll in and out, like, expand the planets out or bring them in, get it to that, good size where you can see all four of those sitting off there. Where we'll be by ourselves, the other two planets behind us with the sun. So I'm in a sun, Earth, 4 planets in a square. Now that is also going to dissipate as the planets. Jupiter will start moving away, and probably late 26, early 2027, that field will have broken apart, and it won't have any more effect on us. 2 years after that. And you can actually pretty much wire it down to the month. If you go to solarsystemscope.com and try this yourself and see where all those planets are sitting. Now, if you want to use JPL models or Universal Sandbox, you can go further back in time and go to the year 1486 and the year 79 AD, and you'll see the same exact pattern that you're seeing on Solar System Scope if you want to use the easiest. That's kind of the easiest one to learn on. Play on that one first. There's different layers in there where you can see the constellations. You could put the grids in there. You can take a look where your horizon plane is, with or without the ground on it. So you can do a lot of things to see where your position is in the heavens and whatnot. It's kind of like stellarium a little bit mixed in with the planets from an outer view. So anybody can do that. And you can take a look 2025 and 6. Because see, so far I'm perceiving that also these changes we're seeing right now are on a timeline. But see, this is strange because the timeline matches with my timeline, also with the solar system, the second magnetic field, and all these changes happening with supply chain and switching to a new system seems to be on that same timeline. So I'm seeing a lot of overlap here. Like somebody knows something needs to be done before a certain date, or else it can't be done after that. Is what I'm getting out of the whole Great Reset.
That makes sense. It's a manufactured kind of collapse. I personally think anyway. But do you think that the sun changing color has anything to do with the sun, the grand solar minimum, and the sun cycles? Because there's no mistaking that the sun is different, right? It's than it used to be. I'm only 28 years old, but I remember the sun being yellow whenever I was a kid, and now it's bright white. It's really strange and alarming, and I don't think enough everyday people pay attention to the sun and its activity to even notice it. But it's and I think if people would just pay attention a little bit more and realize that things are changing on a fundamental level, and it's in our face, right? Like you can go and look like, but the problem is, David, is they've flipped this and they've turned it into a heating instead of a cooling, right? And what's your thoughts on why they would flip that and turn it into something that's not, when they know that it's actually a cooling cycle and a cooling period instead of a heating period? Do you think that it could have might have been that they thought somewhere down the line that it was a heating, but they went too far with it and they couldn't go back on it? Or do you think that they always knew that we were hitting this grand solar minimum of low sun activity, and they're just not letting anyone know and not letting the public and the masses know to create this whole reset?
Well, the panic would start far before any of these changes. Well, they're already seeing changes affecting a lot of people's lives, but in earnest, where 5 out of 10 people or 6 out of 10 would be greatly affected by this with some sort of system that delivers something to them breaking during this natural cycle. The panic would ensue tomorrow. If this kind of type of information, like, you understand it, you're a smart guy, you can put pieces of information together, synthesize it, say, hey, this is great for me, it's not good for me, I've taken, okay, great, now, okay, we're here, what solution could we use? That's the way I think. But you put blast this across the news to just average everyday person, they're going to freak out, absolutely freak out. I think the rule of law would stop first, and then all the investment would be done. Nobody would even want to go to work tomorrow. They sure wouldn't invest in anything, because 2024 is not like investing for your retirement in 40 years. So the whole understanding of daily life would shift once people realize in 3 years we're going to hit this second magnetic or field coming in, and there's 2 waves of it. The first wave is 2024, 25, 23, and the 23 it'll apex 24, and then it'll drop off 25. So you're going to get that cycle top and bottom here. Things just wouldn't work. So if you knew it was inbound, you'd have to create an excuse for it. Again, front running. They're going to front run the excuse before the actual event happens. So somebody knew the cycle was here. Now, when I was a kid, I was taught global warming, and this is the reason that I bring it up, because back in the 1950s, 1930s specifically, they were talking about the planet warming a lot because they had the Great Dust Bowl, and they were hitting like these incredible temperatures in the 1930s. Now, I'm not trying to get political. Some people with their research saying NOAA had decreased the 1930s temperatures compared to what they really were. Otherwise, we'd be seeing some extreme similar temperatures today. But by cooling the past, it makes the now appear warmer. Or you can go with what the numbers are, but we're getting really close to some extreme heat events again. So back in the 1930s, they were claiming it was warming. Same newspaper articles, the Arctic's ice is going to disappear. And then it got cold. World War II came, and then they had some really brutally cold winters in the 1950s. And then all the scientists then started to say, hey, well, we're coming into an ice age in the 1970s. And they were talking like full-blown 2-mile ice, deep, thick over New York City kind of ice age. Not a mini ice age, not a grand solar minimum. The whole 70s cold panic was all about an ice age. But you got to realize, how does this play into it? Because in the 1950s is when they started that whole there's coming an ice age. It got freezingly unbelievable cold. That was the Buffalo blizzard, where all those people were locked in. They had to bring the army in to deliver supplies in Buffalo. I think it was 1977. snowed for like 90 some plus straight days, and they could never, the entire city was locked in a snow event. There was a snowball, snow globe at the end of the event. And then that cool stopped in the 1980s, and then bam, global warming started, where we were the culprits for emitting whatever had been done in the 1950s and 60s for, bringing the world into a faster moving time. But they were pre-building the excuses for what you're going to see already coming in. Now, okay, so that's on the easy side of it, because they built global warming into the excuse side of things. So since I was a kid, it's been, global warming based on CO2. In the 50s and whatnot, it was all based on guys cutting the trees and plastics and stuff just coming in. Oh, chlorofluorocarbons. There's always been something going back even to the 50s. No, then it was everything from the arsenic to the asbestos, and you just tick the box on all these million things that have been thrown out there. But it's been really groundwork laid for the last 50 years or so to get people ready to see massive significant changes all around them at all times, everywhere. Now, the sun changing is something they don't want you to really discuss too much. So I'll bring you back to another way to look at what we're talking about, the color changes on the sun. It's called angstroms. Now, there's different colors of the sun and different angstrom wavelengths. It just cuts out. So, regular white light, red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet. Now, if I could strip away all the other colors and only show you the green wavelength coming off the sun, it gives you an entirely different profile magnetically and what's happening with the plasma and that sort of thing. If you go to SOHO satellites from NASA, you will see all the different angstroms and different wavelengths. And they even have the one that's just magnetometer, strict magnetic field on the sun, so you can see where the sunspots are based on the magnetic field being a little tweaked on the surface there. John Casey's book is the best indicator where the sun color is going to go. Cold Sun was his very first book, and he put a blue angstrom wavelength light on the front cover of his book. So the change from orangish to yellowish, and now we're sort of into this white. Are we tinging toward blue? Is that where the transition point is? Because like if you're going to flip colors, so let's say you're looking at a rainbow in the sky, and then it terminates into two colors, and the way the sky is going to bend and it's going to flip to a new color, would you see a white like tinge there, or something white before it bent into the next color? Because if you're going from yellow to blue, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a transition point there. And is that rollover point the white that we're seeing in the sun now before it transitions to blue? Because you got red, orange, yellow, blue. So we've seen the orange sun, we see the yellow sun. Now we're going into what? It's not going to flip back to orange because it's already gone white. So is it the transition from that? Really, it's going to go and it's going to snap into blue. See, we've never seen this before. Ancients talk about the exact same thing happening. A transluminance, and then there's a veil, and then boo, the sun's a different color. But you got to go back to, if you got to study myth and legend to find these things. They're not going to come out and teach that in the school books. Mm-hmm. It's myth. It's a legend from those people living in caves that didn't know anything. Well, they only saw every plasma display that we can replicate in a plasma laboratory today, and then wrote it on the walls thousands of years before we even had the experiments to create the same shapes in the plasma chambers. Like those are the people they're saying archaic and have no knowledge, that are just cavemen, had scribbled down every possible combination that's been seen in the last 20 years in plasma experiments already on the canyon walls. They saw it before. So they've experienced it. They know exactly what's happening. So when they talk about a white veil enveloping the sun and then it snaps into a different color, I think it's doing that spectral color change moving over. But again, you want to believe a bunch of myth and legend, or do you want to just believe the scientist? Settled after. Science is settled, by the way. Don't ask any questions. It's settled.
Yeah, I always like the movie A Day After Tomorrow. Have you ever seen the movie A Day After Tomorrow?
There's a little something. There's a little message in there too.
Yeah, that always resonated with me a lot. I don't really know why, but I always liked it ever since I saw it in 2008, and I just rewatched it recently, dude. And it's some really cool things, and that's what
you take away from them. So some of these things in Hollywood are showing you what's going to happen in advance, like the move 2012. That's the land subsistence stuff. So what did you take out of the movie Day After Tomorrow. I'm really curious your glimpse into it. You know, what did you see as the message that they're trying to deliver, that sort of event will happen?
Well, I've seen that's what they're basically preparing for, and they've just flipped it on its head, and they've turned it into a warming thing when it's really going to be a cooling thing, and we're going to go through a global cooling. And I don't know if it's going to be as bad as it was in that movie with because it was basically a mini ice age, and in the movie Day After Tomorrow. And I think it's to catch people off guard. Tell the people that you're going to do something one way when it's really the opposite way. And that's what they've been doing that for so long, and they've put that into the movies, they put it into the TV shows. And it's just, are we smart enough? Do we have the critical thinking? Do we have the awareness and the intuition to pick apart what they're showing us and then create our own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs? Because that's the way that I work whenever I listen to someone talk, or if I watch a movie or I watch a TV show, is I take the information that's presented and then I add my own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs to it. And I feel like that's not what a lot of people do anymore, because they've erased critical thought and common sense from a lot of people's brain in that way, to where whenever they listen to someone talk or they watch a movie, they regurgitate the information instead of putting your own spin on it and thinking outside of the box with your own thoughts, ideas, and beliefs. That's the way that I've always worked. When I listen to someone speak, I'm able to rearrange everything that they're saying and then add my own spin with thoughts and ideas, right? I feel like that's where a lot of people are missing this, because again, it's not taught. You're not taught to do that. You're not taught healthy debate. You're not taught to think critically in school or think outside of the box. They want everyone in uniform. They want everyone in a line and looking at a very narrow point of view, a very narrow perspective of what's going on, and blanket everybody with the same thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, getting them walking around like a freaking robot that can't think for themselves and just go along with what everybody else is doing. But
they're comfortable. That's why they're doing it. They're comfortable.
Yeah, it comes down to a comfortability and a fear, right? And a fear of being different, a fear of being looked at different, a fear of being laughed at, a fear of being made fun of, a fear of embarrassment. But they don't realize if they hold their ground and they stand with integrity and they do what they say that they're going to do, then it's going to, work out better for them if unless they go along with everybody else. It's the 100th, monkey effect, or whatever the name of that whole thing is, monkey see, monkey do. And they've been really good at doing that, and creating our culture and shepherding people in a certain direction that they want them to go into illusionary reality, instead of making your own and creating your own timeline and creating your own reality. They want you grouped in to the think tank of the global consciousness of the planet. And once you step out of that box and you do something different, then you're ridiculed, your character assassinated. It was like what we were talking about before we started the show, right? They'll pick out one thing that you might have said that is, crazy conspiratorial or something that is not accepted by the majority, and then they blast that everywhere to discredit you, when 99% of everything that you were saying was very solid and very truthful. They'll pick out that one thing that you said 2, 3, 4 years ago, or even last week, and discredit you with that. It's unbelievable. It's psychological warfare. That's how they do it. It's all a psychological game, and they've got it down to a T, and the way that they execute it and plan it It's so concise and precise, and it gets very overwhelming to the point that we think that there's absolutely nothing that we can do. So we just end up complying with everything that they want. You know, when we don't realize that if we stand up and we do something and we hold our ground, that's going to create a ripple effect, just like the negativity and fear creates a ripple effect. You know, once one person stands up and starts talking about these things and bringing out truth, that's going to help a lot of other people too, right? We just don't give up. You know, we just don't stop. We just don't put down the sword. We keep pushing through, because you never know who you're going to affect or who you're going to change with your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs when you hold and when you stand your ground, no matter what, no matter the opposition, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how negative things might be, or who thinks what about you, or whoever has any kind of perception about you, because everyone has a different perception. You know, you have a different perception. I have a different perception. We all have different things happening in our life, right? We all have different beliefs. You know, you were raised differently than me. You're from a different background than me. You know, but that doesn't mean that people can't get along and put aside our differences, but they've put the attention on our differences instead of our similarities. And that's how they create so much division and so much confusion. And not only that, they feed certain parts of the country different information than other parts of the country. So no one can ever be on the same page about anything. Sorry, I went on a little rant there.
No, that's good. You know, I was thinking this is a compliment. I don't never, Ryder, do you even have a box? Because you say you step out the box. I don't even know if you had a box to begin with to step outside. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's going to be stepping out of the box during this change. That's the thing that's going to, you know, make the elites fear a lot, is because when people step outside that box and they're no longer comfortable, they're going to behave way differently. This comes back into the resonant field here. You can do something with your body, or you can do something with your mind. And see, this is what scares elite the most. Once you understand the power of your mind during this transition cycle and change, as these magnetic and electromagnetic changes are happening across the solar system, they're going to be laid bare for all to see. And once you understand that and you use your mind and say, we don't accept this, control this reality on top of it, we're able to bend it to say, make that thing poosh, go away in the mind. And enough people are thinking it. Since we're in a faster vibratory state, that thing can be pushed down. It's a lower energy anyway, that's kind of sinking out of our consciousness. Because if you follow the yuga cycles around, again, there's an enormous amount of great information from, you know, different cradles of civilization. And then if you go into the Indian Vedic text, and, you know, stories going back 2,500 years. And then you look at the Harappa Valley and Indus Valley and all these cradles of civilization 4,500 years ago. And it's a vast amount of information about when we go around a cycle, and this just goes right along with where we sit in the solar system energetically, as well as the spiral arm of our galaxy. Like, you know, you're going back 4,500 years in time, but the peoples of the time had mapped out the cycles of when we're in a higher energetic area of this, of the spiral arm of our galaxy on a cycle as well. You know, we're stars are, and solar systems are in orbits around themselves as well, albeit at a slower rate. And how is it that Mayans even had 220 million year cycles mapped out above and below the ecliptic? One full time around the entire galaxy was 220 million years. So in 220 million years from today, we will sit with our planet in the solar system in the exact same place. So who's mapping these kind of cycles and knew what was going on? But one thing that's always talked about is, as these cycles are progressing in faster vibratory energy in areas of space, we are now transiting through and began entering the new age of Aquarius. You know, whether it's in Indian Vedic text or modern astrology, and astronomy and astrology used to be the same science. They just broke them apart a couple hundred years ago. But until that point, astronomy and astrology were always connected, because they understood more deeper levels of energetics, electrical flow, changes in electromagnetism that affect the way the human perceives reality, built into the way we're transiting around this, the space that we're going in our spiral arm here. As we progress out of this, we're heading out of the Kali Yuga, which is super dark, like iron heavy energies. and I encourage everybody to look at the Yuga cycles, we are entering into something called the Para Yuga. And each day is energetically and more vibrationally higher as we are finally coming up to the Satya Yuga, which is where you can almost manifest instantly. Like the one greatest movie I saw about this instant manifestation capability, which has been referenced time and time and time and time again at the top of the Yuga cycles, is this movie called Green Lantern, where this guy can think something and in a second it appears, like a fraction of a second. This is the capabilities we have when we reach this highest point. But then, we all understand that we're all interconnected. The Earth's interconnected with us and everything. And you're looking through an energy field basically that vibrates faster, called gases. And we're all connected through the energy field. All souls are all connected. So there's, at that point where there's instant manifestation capability, you're at a much higher realization level of how it all works together. But we just entered out and exited out of the Iron Age. But you got to realize what had gone on for the last 1,000 or so or 2,000 years of just like the deepest centralized control where, you could burn people if they didn't believe. And that was sanctioned by church and government to do all these things. I mean, the most horrific crimes in the last 1,000 years were committed by some of these same entities. And, we're going faster each day vibrationally. So we're rising out of the soup, if you will. So think of a piece of lead, and that's the color of like this Kali Yuga, is a dark lead. And you're vibrating faster, almost like a hummingbird starting to come out of that. Like how dense is the lead compared to something moving much faster like a hummingbird? That's the change we're experiencing. That's the best way I can describe it, is now use the mind to say, we don't want any more of that lead energy, get it out, because we can, the vibrational frequency of your mind in this unified energy field is moving faster. So the result is happening faster. So millions of people doing it at the same time saying, this is no longer serving us. This is keeping us down. This is not allowing us to spiritually evolve. This needs to go away out of our frequency of even seeing it. And imagine millions of people coming on that frequency level. Forget your arms and legs moving to make change. What about just using your mind in mass? This is what's terrifying, I think. And I encourage you to look at all of the ancients talking about the cycles and the energy they provide into the human. Now, if you were the iron guys down there, the lead guys, and you still wanted to maintain control, but you got to control all the hummingbirds now, how are you going to do that? And then, it's going to get even faster.
The only issue that I see here, David, is a bunch of people, and if that happens and we get to that peak energetic point where we will be able to manifest things instantly, if people don't have control of their mind and they haven't reprogrammed their subconscious and unconscious mind, then
that would be a disaster.
Yep.
That's 10,000 years from now when you come to the top of that next cycle. 10,000 years is a lot of time for people to, like you say, get into that centered spot, because each generation will understand it a little bit better. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, go. That's fine. That's just where I see a lot of chaos, and because a lot of people can't really even handle their manifestations now, and we're not we're not able to manifest things. I mean, some people can do it instantly, but it's very difficult because, again, you have to go in and reprogram your entire mind and get out all of that the nonsense that's been programmed in there through society, through TV, through school, through all of the lies that's been told to us for decades. But that is our superpower, and that is something that the elites and the controllers of this reality do not want us to know, is how powerful we are. Our brains are like a supercomputer, right? And they don't want us to tap into that. And if a bunch of different supercomputers all come together, then we could potentially be unstoppable on many fronts. And that's a big reason why they do so much of the division and getting people fighting each other with, the political, the racial, the information control in general, right? Because they don't want everybody on the same page. Because if we're all on the same page and we decide that we don't want this reality anymore and that it's keeping us very low on the totem pole, then we have the ability to do something about it if we all come together. But again, will that be allowed to happen? I really don't know. And that's the big question, right? It is the controllers and the manipulators of our reality going to try and hijack this increase of consciousness that's going to wash over the planet or not? Right? That's my thought on that. Is do they have the ability? Can they? Will they? Will we let them? Is the question.
Maybe it's a basic survival instinct that's in all of us that's been suppressed into not being a basic survival instinct, but maybe at the deepest level, it'll just whoosh, turn on again. Because, you know, they kept it, the comfortable zone is where people are not into action. The reason that people go to school, and, you know, you referenced being in the box, is, you know, people have this pattern of, you know, going from this, learning this, getting a job, and staying in that whole flow. So a society continues to work in the same fashion, cogs in a wheel, if you will, because it's comfortable. And you got to think about the humans going back through some of these cycles I talk about. I mean, Earth's population has been whacked down so many times to just under 100 million people. We've had some serious bottlenecks in human population on this planet. At least 3 very good ones that have knocked population down to almost nothing, but each time it comes back. I mean, it's like the bison buffalo out. And if you wouldn't have known, if you look at a long-term trend of the bison population in Western United States over, say, a 2 million year period, that little knockout of where, you know, when they came in 1849, people chasing the gold, and, you know, they wiped out the buffalo down to, like, I don't know, a couple 100,000 or even less, 10,000. Over a 2 million year timeline, they would rebound once humans are gone. You would barely even see, I don't even know if it would be registerable, that little blip on time over that period of a time. If you're talking about the last 200 years, there's going to be a gigantic dip. But if you're talking about super long-term trends, you might see a little blip in there, but go another million years out, when they get those planes back and the buffalo populations are over 2, 3, 4 million again, it would just be a fraction and segment of time. And I was going somewhere with a thought, but I forgot it because I was trying to get deep on it, but that's what happened. Oh, but that's all about the stability, right? The safety of things. So people aren't going to be in any sort of action unless, but survival is our main thing, because since we've been knocked down with the population several times in the past, it's sort of a survival technique for us as well. You know, populations over a longer term time frame. I mean, we don't even know the records are so terrible going back anything post 3,500, 4,000 years ago. It's near impossible to find anything except around China and maybe some of the Central Asia or African records. I mean, beyond that, it's abysmal what's happened in our global past, hardly known. But some more recent events show that, yeah, people got knocked out at the knees of the global population. So just knowing that it wouldn't have happened during this 10,000 years of non-glacial activity, you know, because we're in an interglacial right now. It's 10,000 years of warmth. Generally, this planet's locked in ice for 90,000 years. They get you to forget that too. This 10,000 years is very, very, very special. We get it once every 90,000 years. So what happened to the prior interglacial, 110, 118,000 years ago, when people were just the same as us? Well, they didn't sit around for 10,000 years and not do anything. You know, but where were they on the Yuga cycle going around as well? Were they at the bottom trying to climb out, or were they already halfway up at the top? And you know, because vibrationally, if you were up higher on that Yuga cycle, you wouldn't be burning stuff. You wouldn't be leaving metal all over the place. You'd be doing it in a different fashion, where your trace on what we consider civilization, quote unquote, because you got to have metal and clunky machines and things, that wouldn't even be an option back then. Not even an option. You wouldn't need it. It just wouldn't even make sense that you could manifest something pretty quick and your whole society could think together and create things. Fossil burning, digging stuff would make no sense. Plus you're harming the earth, which would be a whole different thing. They'd be so in tune with that as well. Like, you know, Tesla talks about the ether and all this. Well, why would you destroy the very energy field that creates all life and holds it together? Why would you start destroying that and then mess up the ether, if you will, when you used to have a permanent power supply coming from that? Like, that's the kind of thought that would be at the top of the cycle. We're programmed to be comfortable. And when it comes to cataclysm, there's always some sort of like base, you know, just carnal and animal or whatever base instincts that are in there to locked in place to keep you alive. That's why comfort's so hard to break people out of it. You know how long it's been since people in the world have been this comfortable? Never. So the more comfortable they get, the less they want change, because through all of Earth's history, it's been about you rise up a little bit, cataclysm, you rise up a little bit, cataclysm, you rise up a little bit, famine. So to be comfortable, nobody wants to rock that boat ever, because most of history is uncomfortable. And maybe that's where we're resonating on that base pattern where comfort is survival. And that is the base survival mechanism, is survival. So if comfort is survival, everybody's in that survival mode in comfort, you know, versus stepping out of the box, which we've put ourselves into a little bit different situation. But, you know, most people love the comfort. It's comfortable and it's survival. And nobody's going to be there in a few years. So why? You know, this is going to get ripped out from everybody. The rug's going to get pulled. And I'm not laughing at that, but I'm just like envisioning a box full of like cartoons dropping out. Like they're going to turn into cartoon characters being so freaked out when it happens.
Yeah, I agree, unfortunately. And you spoke about survival there. So what would you recommend? I know that you talk about it all the time on your show, but what would you recommend for people to do to survive the next decade? I mean, I know there's fundamental things like, you know, grow your own food, stock up with, you know, what you can, try and be out of big cities as much as possible for whenever these inevitable events happen. But what's something that, because I've had people comment on my videos when I've kind of delved into this topic a little bit, and they have questions like, should I buy solar panels? You know, should I be stocking up on, you know, methane, you know, all of these kinds of things. And I've been waiting for this interview to kind of ask you this question. And what's the most valuable thing that someone could do right now to try and prepare? I mean, we know that we're already far into this, right? And if you're not prepared already somewhat, then you're getting a late jump, right? You're late to the party. But let's say someone is just now hearing this and didn't know anything about anything that we've discussed here today, David. What's something that they can do to try and get prepared for what's about to happen?
To put your mind in the correct space first, to understand these changes are going to happen. They're here, they're real, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world, because I think right now there's more opportunity than there ever has been in human history, because there's more people that will need more services during these changes than ever has in human history. So I'm coming from that mind frame. So jack of all trades is going to be more of a required thing, just like our grandparents. Man, everybody knew how to fix everything on the farm. Now we have specialists, which is also build out your skill set. So you mentioned solar panels. Okay, I could install the solar panels, have them at my house, but if it breaks, I don't know how to fix it. Like if you're going to be a specialist, if you're going to own solar panels, understand how to fix, repair, tweak, you know, get some batteries from something else and make it fit for storage of the electricity, get some, you know, inverters, whatever you need to be an expert of that. So, because see, a lot of stuff's going to break and we're not going to have repair parts anymore. So to be an expert, and that's what I mean, jack of all trades is great for most of the basic stuff like woodworking, but I'm going to go out and build some stuff after we're done with the interview here. I'm trying to work on my woodworking skills right now, knowing how important it is for woodworking and stuff that you can build with wood to have your functionality in a place or repair something with good measurements. You know, you can, it's kind of a mind exercise too. But for example, for solar panels, I would learn how to repair them. Take classes, all that stuff's free. You can get it either online and get as much downloadable resources of repairing stuff as I could online. Here's my conundrum. You know, you can get gigs and gigs of information on PDFs on how to repair stuff, how to build stuff. But by the time you print it out, this whole room's full of paper, you know, and then if you're going to have an EMP, you know, did you build a small Faraday cage to keep your memory sticks in? But then, you know, do you have a computer? And I mean, how big does your Faraday cage need to be? And how many solar panels and all backups and generators and things do you even have where you could get the information off the stick? So then it comes down to like, what's the most important stuff for you to tweak your skill set to be the very best that you can to solve other problems of repair from things that are breaking down and will break down that there'll be no repair parts for. Because if let's say you do solar and you know how to repair everything and you've just seen it up, down, umpteen times, you're welcome in every community. There will never be a community ever that will turn you away in the future when they all turn to solar and all these things. You're welcome in any, how many people have solar across the planet now in different countries? Oh my gosh, you'd be welcome in any town that has a power grid down on a permanent level. We're talking about somebody that has a grid down for a year. And people got solar and you know how to repair everything. Are you kidding me? These are the targeted skills that are going to be survival. And the water. Okay, well, are you a water catchment expert? Are you going to put it in the pipes? You're going to put it in a pond? You're going to put it in catchment tanks? Like, where are you going to get tanks from? How are you going to run? What angle do you need? Okay, you're going to generate electricity from that. Where can we get a hydro motor? And okay, gravity. I mean, how many feet up do we need push for pull down on the head on the hill there? If you're becoming an expert at some water storage techniques and things like this, generating electricity from water, somebody else may have the electrical skill. So if you find an alternator on somebody's car, you can tweak it and like build a pipe around it so it spins and you create electricity in the alternator to charge stuff. All right, if you got the skill set for the water, I guarantee somebody else got the electrical skill to put something on there so you guys can get electric made on a micro hydro. So it's all about targeting and tweaking the skill sets, because I want somebody who can pretty much do everything. And that's what I'm trying to teach myself, is how to do everything, but become expert at something. So you're the number one mind in that thing. Wherever you go, you're always welcome, because an expert in something of repair or build out at this juncture, oh my gosh. And medicine would be my last thing. You know, I'm taking this Stop the Bleed class. We're using tourniquets for big injuries, you know, something on the EMT side of just some first responder type thing. Can you stitch anybody up? I got this stitch kit here. You can buy them online, like $50, and it's replicates skin, and they give you all the sutures, and they got different things you can use in there to cut. Throw some sand in it and see how clean you can get it before you stitch it up. Just an enormous amount. Everybody's going to need to know basic medicine. And, you know, growing food, Ryder, you brought up a great point. One of the skills we're all going to have is growing food, period. You're going to have to grow it. It's going to be like your grandparents' day. Get a root cellar up. It's just going to be a part of your life. So enjoy it, embrace it, and make the best food you can possibly make ever. That is going to feed and nourish so many people that they will be thankful at the end of the meal, dancing on the table, because that food was so good that you served them. If you go in with that mind frame, you're going to love going out to pick the apples off the tree, or go get whatever you can for lettuce or the beets or the okra, or we're going to can some beans. We're going to put the tomatoes up for sauce. You're going to love what you do. And people are going to appreciate it. And that's just going to resonate through everything you do. Just embrace the changes that are coming. And can you take that tree, the bark, the flower, the root, or whatever, and turn it into a medicine? And so this is another thing I'm trying to delve into, is the plants on my property, understanding in each month of each season, what's edible, what's coming in, what fruits, what flowers, what medicines are available from natural plant life to turn something in. My easiest example, marigolds. Marigold heads, you know, the colorful orange and yellow, or sometimes all bright orange, light orange, whatever the heads. If you boil that down, you can make an antibiotic tincture with it. And now you start to think, not only is it an insect repellent, but I'm growing my own medicine and an antibiotic form and fashion, which is going to be a big thing, because if people are working on the farm, they're going to cut their hands, feet, and they're going to have many more like smaller injuries. But, you know, sometimes a cut on your hand will just get out of control. It'll get a little infected and you're like, oh, drop some rubbing alcohol on it. But what if you don't have rubbing alcohol? You're going to have to start thinking out of the box, either getting your own still up so you can, you know, do a batch and then keep the heads and tails off that, and then triple refine it to something like isopropyl rubbing alcohol and make your own medicine from distilling. But then you'll also have the alcohol during that time, like apple schnapps, peach schnapps, pear schnapps, plum schnapps, 40%. I mean, alcohol is always a tradable. So again, if there's a laser niche, like I don't know how to do it. I've watched a few other people. I like the idea. I'll play with it. Will I be an expert in distilling? No. But I'll have the skill if somebody else is doing it, that I could jump in with a little tiny bit of knowledge going, oh, hey, I'll get those screws for you. Oh, let's see. Oh, let's scrape that off. Well, what temperature do we need to set the burner at? That kind of stuff. Let the expert tweak it to where, you know, they know where they're going to cut the heads and tail and get the drinkables versus what you want to turn into rubbing alcohol. The same thing, if you're woodworking, do you have enough knowledge to even draw a straight line with a ruler or something on a piece of wood so somebody else can cut it after you mark it and measure it? You know, screw sizes and things. I mean, if you know the basics of that, you can jump in anywhere. Everybody would love to help. That's what I mean by being a jack of all trades in a lot of things, to understand basics, to help others who are better. But at the same time, you becoming an expert in just one thing, just one. But just kind of understand the other ones, from basic medicine to growing your own food and being a generalist around that can help repair things. Because you got to think about it, they did barn raising parties. They still do, the Amish farm down here. Everybody takes part, even the littlest of kids, they get there and they help. Everybody understands how to build a barn. That's how they get it done so fast when you have a barn raising party, because everybody's done it the whole time and it's super fast. I mean, you and I would take years to do it, or months, and they're up there in the afternoon and finished, you know. And you would be welcome if you knew how to do any of the woodwork or the tools or cut, saw, anything, you would have been welcome. Even cleaning up. Hey man, where does this hammer go? Where does this, learn the tools, whatever. So anyway, I'm gonna, there's a lot of things to think about going forward, but I would leave it at that. Be a generalist to understand jack of all trades for all the basics, but be an expert in one of them, and one that's going to count, one that's going to bring a community forward. So for me, it's always about creating fertilizers out of something. Algae, if you know algae, and this is one of my things, everybody got to know this too. You got to know this one. Algae that grows in every pond is some of the best fertilizer on the planet. So at the end of the year, like we got some algae down here at this pond about at the end of the driveway. I'm going to go start pulling that off, because A, it's suffocating the fish, but B, it burns way hotter than wood. I mean, super way hotter than wood. It's got the oil in it. That's why it floats on the water. It's already got natural oil. Ever heard of algae biodiesel before? You can create fuels from that if you got a press. But you can just squeeze it up into a charcoal briquette size and burn it, and will it ever get hot? It'll get way hotter than the wood. So you can use it as a fuel, you can use it as a fertilizer. And those are, I guess that's where I would stop is, are you an expert enough to give something back to the community that will keep them alive and enhance their life, to bring them back to comfort? Because see, that's the whole trick. Everybody got stuck on comfort. We're so comfortable, we're not willing to accept change, and it's here, and the change is going to be so stark and so fast and so incredibly outside of what most people's comprehension is, that they're going to want to swing back into comfort again. And if you can help them do that, you'll be very valuable and welcome into every community you'll ever pass through.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful advice, David. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing.
That makes sense though. I mean, does that make sense?
100%. I mean, that's where it's really going to be at. And the problem and the issue is that they've gotten rid of all the trade schools. Like there's no shop class in high school anymore. There's very few trade schools available. So a lot of people don't know how to do this anymore. They've been so used, again, to the comfortability of calling someone to come fix all of their things. And I'm guilty of that too. Like I don't know how to fix a lot of things, but I have the awareness that we've taken that to the very far extreme, and we've made a lot of people useless idiots. And I don't mean that in a degrading term or a slanderous way, but it's the truth. We've taken, everyone that can fix things and do wood shop and the, plumbers, like people like that, we've taken them for granted. And there's not enough people because they stopped pushing the trades. They stopped making schools for people to learn how to do those things and natural survival skills. They've completely cut that out of our everyday society and got us locked into this social kind of system where you just rely on the other person and rely on the other person to know how to do something instead of trying to figure it out yourself. And I see that as a huge problem going forward, because we're going to be lacking a lot of the fundamental things that we are going to need to survive. And we are either going to learn how to do them or we're not. And that's going to be trouble for a lot of people in the coming future. But again, David, thank you so much for coming on my show and sharing all this with us. Has been super enlightening, and I appreciate you a lot, brother. And where can people find you if they would like to contact you? I'll give you a little opportunity here to plug whatever you got going on.
Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, the new Telegram channel, Adapt 2030. Keep abreast of some of the news. While I'm surfing a lot of things doing my videos, I don't use everything that I come across, but I do find some of it interesting enough where I would throw it into a Telegram channel where you might get some discussion going. And one last thing here. Like I said, we've been set up in society, like they're taking away the trade schools and whatnot, but we still are. It's even more compartmentalized and more in a box than ever. But I think Pink Floyd described it most correctly, just another brick in the wall. It's exactly what we are being programmed to be. Thanks for having me on, Ryder. It's a great talk.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone else for watching and listening, and much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the YouTube channel out in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notification. The link to my backup video platform on Odyssey is in the description. Hit the follow button over there. You can also catch this episode and any of my other episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts too, and you can download them on Spreaker.com directly to your device for free. The links are in the description. Thank you all so much. And again, David, for coming on my show and sharing all of your knowledge. You're welcome back on this channel at any time in the future.
And yes, thank you, Ryder, for that invitation. And for those of you looking for storable foods after all the talk we've done here, My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030, 25-year shelf life, keep yourselves more grand solar minimum and everything prepared as we move through 2022. I do thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.